Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I found the place by accident, which is how most of my good decisions started after the world went sideways. I had been moving mostly at dawn, staying off the big roads, and cutting through alleys and service lanes that still had their chain-link gates half closed, like the city itself was trying to hold its breath. I was running on the last quarter of a battered hiking pack, the last 2 granola bars, and the kind of stubbornness that gets people hurt when they should be resting. Philadelphia had gone quiet in a way that didn't feel natural, not peaceful, just paused. Like the power had been cut to a giant machine and all the belts were still spinning down. I wasn't looking for a home. I was looking for a place I could stop moving for more than a few hours without hearing footsteps outside the door. What I saw first was the fence. Tall chain link, topped with 3 strands of barbed wire, running along a wide yard that looked like it belonged to the city. The kind of place you drive past 100 times without noticing. A municipal services yard where the streets department kept trucks and equipment, where contractors staged materials, where a city quietly stored the tools that keep it alive. I recognized it because I delivered there once years ago. I drove for a building supply company back then, forklift certified, commercial driver's license, the whole routine. We dropped off palletized traffic cones and stacks of steel signposts. I remembered the smell: diesel, hot asphalt, old hydraulic fluid, and summer trash. Now it was abandoned, and that was the first thing about it that didn't make sense. A place like that is a magnet in a crisis. Fencing panels, generators, fuel, tools, trucks, spare parts. Everything you'd need to build a better shelter out of a worse world. Which meant, if it was empty, either nobody had thought of it, or everyone who had thought of it hadn't made it. I stayed low behind a row of parked cars with flat tires and broken glass. I watched for a full 10 minutes, which in my new life was an eternity. No movement inside the yard. No voices. No engine noise. No smoke from a burn barrel. Nothing. But that didn't mean safe. The infected didn't camp, they drifted. They clustered where noise and light had been, and they didn't need to be inside the yard to make the yard a problem. The yard sat open to the sky, like a little island of industrial space in a sea of row houses and small warehouses. A hard rectangle of cracked pavement and gravel with equipment parked in lines. If you stood on the roof of a truck, you could see over the whole neighborhood. Visibility was a blessing and a curse. If you were inside, you could see trouble coming. But trouble could also see you. I circled the perimeter, staying on the outside of the fence. There were 2 vehicle gates, one on the main street, wide enough for dump trucks, and a smaller one on a side road with a keypad box and a swing gate. There was a pedestrian gate near what looked like a tiny office building. A guard shack maybe, all locked. Locked meant no easy way in. Locked also meant nobody had bothered to smash their way through. That was good. Or it meant whoever tried got pulled down at the fence and never made it. I kept moving, scanning the corners. The barbed wire was intact. The fence had a few spots where the chain link bowed outward, like someone had pushed against it from inside, but nothing looked torn open. On the far side, behind the yard, was an elevated stretch of railroad track, the old industrial kind that ran behind businesses. The tracks were quiet, but the embankment gave a view into the yard. Another problem. I didn't like that. Then I saw it, a stack of temporary fencing panels. Those galvanized steel frames with chain link mesh, the kind you see around construction sites and street festivals. There were at least 50 of them piled in rows like silver dominoes. Beside them were concrete Jersey barriers, the long waist-high slabs with angled sides, used for traffic control. And in the middle of the yard, half covered by a blue tarp, sat a portable generator the size of a large desk, on a towable frame. The kind of thing you could hook up to a building and run essential circuits. There were also 2 smaller generators in cages near the building, and a cluster of metal fuel cans stacked under a canopy. My mouth went dry. Not from thirst, from the sudden sense of possibility which is a dangerous feeling when you're alone. I walked another lap, looking for an entry point. The most obvious way in was the pedestrian gate. It had a standard metal latch, the kind that could be cut with bolt cutters. The problem was, I didn't have bolt cutters. I had a small pry bar, a utility knife, a folding hand saw, a cheap flashlight, a lighter, and 1 crowbar I'd scavenged from a hardware store 3 days earlier. And I had a hunting rifle, bolt action, slung in a case. I'd grown up around guns. My father taught me. It wasn't a fantasy weapon. It was a tool, and I treated it like a tool, clean, safe, and used only when I had to. The rifle didn't get me through fences. I found my answer near the rear corner. A storm-damaged section where a tree branch had fallen months ago, bending the chain link inward and deforming a fence post. The barbed wire above it sagged but didn't break. The opening wasn't wide enough to walk through. But it might be wide enough to squeeze through. I pressed my fingers into the mesh and pulled. The metal bit into my skin and snapped back like a spring. The fence was still anchored. The post was bent, not loose. If I tried to force it and got stuck, I'd be a loud, helpless shape in a neighborhood that punished loud, helpless shapes. So I didn't rush it. Instead, I looked around until I found what every municipal yard has: scrap. There was a stack of old signposts outside the fence in a ditch, probably dumped there during a cleanup and forgotten. I dragged one over, wedged it into the bent portion of fence, and used it as a lever. I eased pressure slowly, listening for the telltale pop of a metal tie snapping or the creak of a post shifting. The fence gave, a few inches at a time. I widened it enough to slide my pack through first. Then I turned sideways, lifted my jacket collar to protect my neck, and worked my shoulders through the opening. The barbed wire overhead caught my hood and tugged it back. I froze, eased it loose, and kept going. When my boots hit gravel inside the yard, I didn't feel triumph. I felt exposed. The yard was open, no roof, few hiding places. The office building sat on one end, a single-story structure with a flat roof and cinder-block walls. A couple of metal roll-up doors suggested a workshop bay. There were parked trucks, dump trucks, pickup trucks with ladder racks, maybe a street sweeper. 2 skid steers were lined up like squat animals. A backhoe sat with its bucket resting in the dirt, as if it had simply been told to stop mid-task. Everything was still. I crouched behind a stack of wooden pallets and listened. That's when I heard it. A faint, distant sound, like shuffling, far away, not inside the yard. The city reminding me that quiet didn't mean empty. I moved fast but carefully, sticking close to shadows cast by parked vehicles. I didn't run because running makes noise and makes mistakes. I moved like I was late for work and didn't want anyone to notice. The office building's side door was locked, but the window beside it was cracked. Not broken. Cracked, like something had hit it and failed. I tried the handle anyway. No luck. Around the corner, under the small awning, there was a keypad panel. No power, obviously, but the door itself was a heavy steel security door with a metal frame. Not ideal. I shifted to the workshop bay. One roll-up door was half down, stopped midway, leaving a gap maybe 3 feet high. It looked like someone had tried to close it, lost power, and walked away. I got on my stomach and peered under. Inside was dim, but not pitch black. I saw tool cabinets, a workbench, shelves, and no visible movement. I slid my pack through first, then I took off the rifle case and pushed it through. I lay flat, pulled myself forward under the door, and rolled inside, keeping my hands ready for whatever came next. Nothing came. The air inside smelled like old oil and dust. It was cooler than outside, which felt like a mercy. I got to my feet slowly, letting my eyes adjust. The workshop had a concrete floor, stained and scuffed. Pegboards held hand tools, wrenches, hammers, pry bars. A rack of orange traffic vests hung near the door. A first aid cabinet was mounted on the wall with a red cross sticker. Shelves held boxes labeled with thick marker, bolts, fuses, gloves. In the corner, I saw a manual chain hoist hanging from a steel beam. Near it, a pallet jack, a stack of sandbags, and, leaning against the wall, a set of bolt cutters. I stared at the bolt cutters like they were a gift from a person who understood exactly what I needed. I checked the rest of the space first. A storage room, an office with a desk and a calendar frozen on last month, a small bathroom with a broken mirror and a half-empty soap dispenser. No bodies, no signs of a fight, no blood, no chaos. That didn't reassure me, it confused me. Because abandonment on this scale usually came with a story written in broken things. I found the breaker panel in a small utility closet. Main breaker off. Everything off. No power, of course. But the presence of a panel meant I could connect a generator safely if I had one that could output enough and if the circuits were intact. I didn't touch anything yet. First rule, secure the space you're in. Second rule, don't burn down your own shelter by being clever. I pushed a heavy metal tool cabinet against the inside of the roll-up door to make it harder to force. Then I found a wooden 2x4 and wedged it under the cabinet as a crude brace. I checked the side door from inside and found it had a deadbolt. That was a good sign. Strong door, strong frame. I locked it. Now the workshop was my interior refuge. A covered space with one big, vulnerable opening, but defensible if I did it right. Then I went back outside and looked at the yard again, but through the workshop doorway, like I was peering out from a cave. I could live here. The question was, could I hold it? I knew what a place like this offered: materials to build barriers, tools to repair and maintain, vehicles to move heavy things and possibly fuel. But it also offered something else: temptation. Anyone passing by would see it and think exactly what I thought. A municipal yard is a toolbox for survivors, which makes it a target. I took stock like I was at work, because work habits are how you keep from freezing when your brain wants to panic. Fence. Chain link with barbed wire, mostly intact. Multiple gates, perimeter large, too large for one person to patrol constantly. Interior, equipment, vehicles, materials. Workshop and office building offer roof and walls. Limited sleeping options but manageable. Threats: infected attracted to noise and visibility, humans attracted to supplies. Railroad embankment offers overwatch into the yard. Multiple blind spots behind stacked materials. Resources: temporary fence panels, jersey barriers, sandbags, tools, generators, possibly fuel, likely spare batteries, electrical supplies, maybe a radio. My mind immediately started building a plan. Not a fantasy plan, a plan built around what a single person can actually do. I couldn't secure the entire perimeter. The yard was too big, but I could create an inner perimeter. I could pick a smaller footprint around the workshop and office building, and build a layered barrier inside the yard using the temporary fencing panels and jersey barriers to create choke points. I could use vehicles as blocks. I could control entry. And I could make the yard look abandoned from the outside, even if I lived inside. That last part mattered. If I was going to survive, I needed to be boring. I spent the rest of that first day not doing anything dramatic. I did the survival version of housekeeping, inventory, setup, and quiet labor. I searched the office building. The front door was locked, but one window was slightly open and the screen was torn. I used the crowbar to widen it just enough to climb through without breaking glass. I didn't want noise. Inside the office, I found filing cabinets, old paperwork, and a dusty coffee maker. In a closet, I found rain gear, reflective jackets, and a box of work gloves in multiple sizes. In another, I found hard hats and safety glasses. I took a hard hat and laughed silently at myself. Not because it was funny, but because it felt like the closest thing to normal I'd seen in days. A mundane piece of personal protective equipment in a world where the dangers had become very unmundane. I found a small two-way radio in a drawer, the kind used on job sites. It had a charging dock but no power. The battery was dead. I found 2 spare batteries in the same drawer, also dead. I found a city map pinned to a corkboard, marked with colored pins and handwritten notes. Pothole crew, tree crew, sign shop. I found a set of keys in a lockbox mounted under the desk, but the lockbox code was unknown. I didn't waste time on it yet. In the workshop, I found a battery charger for vehicle batteries and a set of heavy jumper cables. I found a stack of extension cords. I found a coil of thick electrical wire, the kind used for temporary power runs. I also found a small portable propane heater, the kind used in garages. A cardboard box beside it held 2 small propane cylinders. Not enough for long-term heat, but enough to keep someone alive on a cold night. I checked the yard's equipment for fuel without opening anything that would spill or smell. Most of the trucks had locking fuel caps. Some were missing caps entirely, suggesting someone had siphoned them already, but I didn't know how much was left. I did find one thing that changed the whole equation: a diesel storage tank. It was a horizontal above-ground tank near the back of the yard, sitting on concrete supports, painted dull white with rust streaks. A placard was mounted on the side, faded but readable. The tank had a pump assembly and a hose reel under a small canopy. I wasn't going to pretend I could read every label perfectly in my stress, but I could recognize a fuel tank when I saw it. If it had fuel, it meant the yard could run equipment. It meant I could run a generator. It meant I could charge batteries. It meant I could have light without candles. Light is safety and danger at the same time. I approached like it was a wild animal. The pump was locked with a padlock through the handle mechanism, but the hose was intact and the tank gauge was visible through a small window. The needle wasn't on empty. It was under half, maybe around a third. That could still be hundreds of gallons, depending on tank size. Enough to matter, enough to be worth defending, enough to get you killed if someone else wanted it. I went back to the workshop and took the bolt cutters. I held them for a second, feeling their weight, feeling how simple it would be to open that padlock. Then I set them down. Not yet, because the moment I opened that tank, I'd be making myself dependent on it, and dependency creates noise, movement, and patterns that can be spotted. I needed to build the inner perimeter first. I needed to make the workshop and office a fortress inside the yard, not just a room inside an exposed lot. So I started moving barriers. If you've never moved a Jersey barrier before, here's the reality. You don't move it by hand. You leverage it, drag it, slide it, use wheels, use machines. I didn't have a forklift running yet. I didn't want to start engines. Engines are loud and loud travels, so I used smaller tools first. I found a long steel pipe in the workshop, something used as a cheater bar for stubborn bolts. I used it as a lever under the edge of a jersey barrier, lifting slightly, and wedged a piece of scrap wood under it. Then I repeated, inch by inch, using leverage to pivot the barrier a few degrees at a time. It took forever. My hands cramped. Sweat ran down my back even in the cool air. But I didn't have to move all of them, I only needed a few. I built my first inner line right in front of the workshop bay opening. 2 jersey barriers arranged so that the gap between them was only wide enough for a person to slip through sideways. I did that so I could block line of sight from the gate and slow anything approaching. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Then I brought temporary fencing panels over and stood them behind the barriers, creating a second layer. I used wire ties and bolts from the shelves to connect panels together. I drove steel stakes through the bottom feet into cracks in the pavement where I could. Where I couldn't, I used sandbags as anchors. By mid-afternoon, I had a crude but functional courtyard in front of the workshop. A small enclosed area with barriers and fence panels that created a maze-like approach. From outside the yard, nobody would see it. From inside, it gave me a controlled entry funnel. I wasn't trying to build a castle. I was trying to buy seconds. Seconds are what keep you alive when you're alone. That night, I slept inside the office building, not the workshop. The office had fewer openings and less smell. I dragged a folding cot out of a storage room and set it in the smallest interior office. I blocked the door with a filing cabinet. I hung a reflective safety jacket in the window facing the yard to obscure the view from outside, like a cheap curtain. I ate cold canned peaches I found in a desk drawer. Someone's forgotten snack stash. I drank water from a bottle I'd been refilling wherever I could. I didn't have a reliable water source yet, which sat heavy in my mind like a stone. I lay on the cot and listened. The city never went fully silent. Even without power, there were distant sounds. Wind moving through trees, a loose sign tapping, something clattering far away. Sometimes a faint, ragged cry that might have been a person or might have been something else. Near midnight, I heard the infected. Not inside the yard. Outside. On the street. Their footsteps weren't like a crowd. More like a scattered shuffle with occasional bursts of speed, like something had spooked them. I heard a thump against metal, a fence somewhere or a dumpster. Then another. Then silence. I held my breath without realizing it. I didn't move. I didn't get up. I didn't peek. Curiosity gets you killed. I learned that before the outbreak too, just in other ways. When the noises faded, I let myself breathe again. And that's when I understood the central problem of my new home. If I stayed, I would be defending a visible location alone. Not a hidden basement, not a sealed attic, an open yard with fences and gates and tempting resources. I could build barriers. I could create choke points. But I couldn't become invisible. The next morning, I made a rule. No engines until I absolutely had to. Instead, I worked manually again. I reinforced the pedestrian gate inside the yard by stacking 2 jersey barriers against it from the inside. It didn't stop someone with tools, but it made it harder to ram or force. I did the same with the side swing gate, using a parked pickup truck as a block. Then, I addressed the bent fence section I'd used to enter. I didn't want that to remain a weak point. I didn't want something pushing in from outside at night and widening it. I took 2 temporary fence panels and wired them to the chain link on either side of the bent area, creating a double layer. Then I stacked pallets inside against it. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't engineered, but it would slow anything trying to get through. After that, I focused on the only thing that could turn the yard from a temporary shelter into something sustainable: power. Power meant charging radios, running lights, charging tool batteries, possibly running a small pump if I needed water. It also meant noise and a signature. I decided to do it in steps, starting with the quietest option. I found a car battery in a truck that looked like it hadn't been touched. The hood latch still worked. The battery terminals were corroded but intact. I removed it using a wrench from the tool rack and carried it into the workshop. It was heavy, awkward, and it reminded me I wasn't as strong as I wanted to be. I found another battery from a second truck, then a third. I set them in a row like trophies. Then I looked at the battery charger. It needed power. So I needed to run a generator. But I didn't want to tow the big generator to the building in daylight. I didn't want anyone watching the yard to see movement and realize someone was home. That was when I noticed the tarp-covered generator in the yard again. I walked out, keeping my head low out of habit, even though nobody was shooting at me. The tarp was secured with bungee cords. I removed them slowly. Underneath was a portable diesel generator on a towable frame, enclosed in a weatherproof housing with vents and access panels. It looked like something used for road work, the kind crews bring when they need to power lights and tools. There was a control panel on one side, protected by a small locked door. The lock was another padlock. This yard loved padlocks. I brought the bolt cutters. The snap of the lock breaking sounded loud in the empty yard, like a gunshot in my imagination. I froze, listening. Nothing answered. The city swallowed it. I opened the panel door and checked the controls. I didn't just start it, I inspected it like I'd been trained to inspect equipment at work. Fluid levels, fuel level, signs of damage, obvious leaks. I wasn't a generator technician, but I wasn't clueless either. The oil looked okay on the dipstick, dark but not dry. The fuel gauge showed low, not empty. The battery connections looked intact. The control panel had labels. I read them. I didn't guess. I traced the output connections. There were standard heavy-duty outlets and a terminal block for direct connection. There were also instructions printed on the inside of the panel door, a step-by-step startup process. I followed it like my life depended on it, because it did. When I finally turned the key and pressed the start, the generator chugged once, hesitated, then caught. The engine tone stabilized into a deep, steady rumble. The sound hit me like a punch. It wasn't deafening, but it was unmistakable. In a silent city, a running engine is a beacon. Sound reflects off buildings. It travels down streets. It invites attention. I let it run only long enough to confirm it was stable. Then I shut it down. I stood there with my hand on the panel, heart racing, not from fear of the machine, but from fear of everything that might have hurt it. I waited. 1 minute, 2, 5. No movement. Still, I knew I couldn't do this casually. If I was going to run power, it needed to be deliberate, timed, and as concealed as possible. So, I made another plan. I would run the generator for short sessions during times when ambient noise was higher, when wind was up, when distant storms covered sound, or when other noises existed. I would keep it behind barriers so it wasn't visible from outside the yard. I would use it to charge batteries and power essential tasks, then shut it down. I towed the generator by hand. It had a tongue like a trailer. I used a ratchet strap and my whole body weight to drag it across the yard in short pulls, resting between efforts. I positioned it behind a row of dump trucks near the workshop, where its sound would be partially blocked and its exhaust would dissipate. Then I ran a heavy extension cord into the workshop. I started it again, this time with purpose. The rumble filled the workshop, a low vibration through the concrete. I plugged in the battery charger and connected it to the first car battery. The charger's fan kicked on. A small light glowed. It was working. It felt like magic. Not because electricity is magic, but because I'd gotten used to helplessness. Any system I could control, any predictable cause and effect, felt like a lifeline. I charged batteries for 2 hours. Then I shut the generator down and waited again, listening. Still no movement. That afternoon, I found the lockbox code the old-fashioned way, not by guessing, but by looking for clues. There was a sticky note inside a drawer with faded ink. New code after audit, 0617. June 17th. Someone's birthday maybe, someone's anniversary. People are predictable. I entered the code. The lockbox clicked open. Inside was a ring of keys with tags. Gate, fuel, shop, truck, number 12, office. I felt something crack in me. Not joy, exactly, but relief so sharp it almost hurt. Keys meant access without breaking things. Breaking things makes noise. Breaking things leaves evidence. Breaking things is what desperate people do when they're out of options. I had options now. I used the keys to lock and unlock gates from the inside. I tested them quietly. The main vehicle gate still worked. The latch still engaged, the smaller side gate as well. And there was a key labeled fuel. I went to the diesel storage tank and used it on the padlock. The lock opened smoothly, like it had been waiting for a responsible person to show up. I didn't celebrate. I filled 2 fuel cans and carried them back to the generator. Diesel smells, but less volatile than gasoline. Still, I was careful. I didn't spill. I didn't splash. I wiped the nozzle with a rag when I was done. I treated it like a work site. Work sites keep people alive by preventing small mistakes. Now, my work site was my shelter. Over the next few days, I fell into a routine, and routine became both comfort and trap. Morning, perimeter check from inside the yard. Walk the fence line. Look for any new damage, any places where the chain link had been pushed or cut. Check gates, check my inner barrier. Look for footprints and dust, human or otherwise. Midday, quiet labor. Reinforce barrier points, move materials, inventory tools, charge batteries if needed, but only when conditions were right. Late afternoon. Scavenging, but only within a limited radius. The municipal yard gave me a base, but it didn't feed me. It didn't give me clean water. It didn't give me medicine. I had to go out. Night. Silent. No lights visible from outside, no generator, no movement that could be seen. I tried to make the yard look dead from the outside. I didn't open gates unless I had to. I kept vehicles in the same positions. I avoided leaving shiny new barriers visible above the fence line. But people notice patterns, especially desperate people. On the 4th day, I saw the first sign that someone else had taken an interest. It was a piece of cloth tied to the fence near the main gate, fluttering in the wind. A white strip like a flag. It hadn't been there before. I didn't touch it immediately. I scanned the street beyond the gate through the chain link. Nothing visible. I waited, then approached slowly, staying behind stacked pallets. The cloth was torn from a t-shirt. There was writing on it in thick marker. Anyone inside? That was all. My stomach tightened. I stared at the words, then looked around again. I didn't see anyone. The street was empty, but empty streets lie. The message could be genuine. It could be a trap. It could be someone who had seen the yard and wanted to know if it was worth approaching. It could also be someone marking the yard for later. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because answering meant admitting I existed. And once you admit you exist, you become a story other people tell. I cut the cloth down and stuffed it into my pocket. I didn't leave it there as a beacon. Then I moved my inner barriers again, tightening them, adding an extra panel, stacking more pallets. I didn't do it out of panic. I did it out of math. Every day the probability of contact increased, and contact was my biggest threat. The infected were predictable in a way humans weren't. They were drawn to sound, movement, and opportunity, but they didn't strategize. They didn't plan. People did. That night, I didn't sleep much. I sat in the office with my back against a wall, rifle across my lap, listening to the wind and the distant shuffling outside the yard. I hated that I was holding a visible location alone, because it meant every decision was mine, every mistake mine, every consequence mine. Near 2 a.m. I heard a vehicle engine in the distance, a single engine moving slow. It wasn't constant. It stopped, then started again, like someone was trying to move quietly but didn't know how. I killed my small flashlight and waited. The engine sound got closer, then cut off. Silence. Then I heard voices, faint, muffled by distance and the fence, but definitely human. I crawled to the office window and lifted the edge of my reflective jacket curtain a fraction. Outside the main gate in the street were 3 people. They were standing near a battered pickup truck with one headlight out. The truck's tailgate was down, and the bed held empty containers, plastic bins, maybe a jerry can. They looked like scavengers. One of them shone a dim flashlight toward the yard, but they kept it low. They weren't idiots. The tallest one, broad shoulders, heavy jacket, walked up to the gate and rattled it gently, testing. Another one, smaller, stood back and watched the street, turning their head like they were listening for trouble. The third stayed near the truck, hands in pockets, nervous posture. They spoke in low voices I couldn't make out. I didn't move. They tried the gate again. Then they moved along the fence line towards the side gate, still outside the yard. They were checking for entry points. My hands tightened around the rifle stock. I kept the muzzle pointed down. I wasn't going to fire through a fence at shapes in the dark. That's how you shoot someone you didn't need to shoot and get yourself killed later. I forced myself to think like a tired adult, not like a frightened animal. If they got in, I could retreat to the workshop and lock it. I could wait them out. I could leave through my old entry point if needed. I had options. If I revealed myself now, I might prevent them from trying to enter, but I might also provoke them. And I was alone. I watched as they reached the bent section of fence in the rear corner, the one I had reinforced. The tall one tested it, pushing. The chain link bowed but held. The temporary fence panel I had wired in place didn't give. They tried again, harder, and I heard the metal strain. Still held. The smaller one said something that sounded like frustration. They moved on. After 10 minutes of searching, they returned to the truck. They stood in a tight group, arguing quietly. Then, as if making a decision, they climbed into the truck and started it. The engine coughed, then caught. They drove away, slow, without turning on full lights. I didn't breathe until the sound was gone. That was my warning. The yard was no longer invisible. The next morning, I made my first big shift. I stopped thinking of the municipal yard as my home. I started thinking of it as my position. Positions are defended. Homes are lived in. That distinction mattered. A position can be abandoned if it becomes a liability. A home becomes a trap when you refuse to leave it. Still, I wasn't leaving that day. Not yet. Instead, I upgraded my defensive posture in ways that didn't involve noise. I created a no man's lane inside the yard, a strip of open space between the outer fence and my inner barrier, cleared of loose materials that could conceal approach. If someone got over the fence, they'd have to cross an exposed area before reaching my buildings. I set up simple alarms. Nothing fancy, no movie tricks. I took empty metal cans from the workshop, old fastener cans, paint cans, filled them with small bolts and washers, and tied them with wire to the interior side of the fence at likely breach points. If someone pushed the fence or cut it, the cans would rattle. I ran wire along the bottom of my inner barrier panels and attached more cans. If someone tried to lift or move panels, the sound would warn me. I also improved my observation. I climbed onto the roof of the office building in the early morning when the light was low, moving slow and careful. From the roof, I could see the surrounding blocks, row house roofs, small streets, the railroad embankment, and the broader skyline toward Center City. The view made me feel powerful for about 10 seconds. Then it made me feel small, because I could also see how open I was, how many angles existed, how many ways people could approach without being seen until they were close. From the roof, I spotted something else, a convenience store 2 blocks away that looked mostly intact, a loading dock behind it, a dumpster enclosure, potential supplies. I also spotted a school building with a chain-link playground fence and a rooftop ventilation unit. Not a safe place, but a marker on the map. I went back down and wrote the locations on the office map like I was running a crew, like I was planning routes for pothole repairs. My brain needed structure. That afternoon, I made a supply run. I didn't take the truck even though I wanted to. Vehicles attract attention. Vehicles break down. Vehicles trap you in your own sense of speed. On foot you can hide, on foot you can listen. I left the yard through the pedestrian gate, locking it behind me. I kept my movements casual, like I belonged there, because sometimes posture's camouflage. I carried a backpack, a small pry bar, and a canvas tool bag I found in the workshop. I also carried a handheld radio I'd found in the office, now powered by a charged battery, even though I knew it wouldn't reach anyone unless someone else had one on the same channel. Still, hearing static felt less lonely than hearing nothing. The convenience store had been hit, of course, shelves half empty, glass broken at the front. But the back storage area still had cases of bottled water stacked on pallets. Whoever had looted it had focused on food and valuables, not water. People make strange choices under stress. I loaded as much water as I could carry, 6 bottles in the pack, 4 in the tool bag. Then I heard movement. Not the slow shuffle of infected, something quicker, a scrape, a foot on gravel. I froze behind a stack of cardboard boxes and listened. A human voice whispered close. "Hey, hey, don't move." My heart slammed into my ribs. I turned my head slowly and saw him in the doorway to the back room, a man in his 30s, maybe older, wearing a dirty hoodie and a construction vest. He held a pistol low, not pointed at me, but ready. His eyes were tired. His face was gaunt. Behind him, I saw another person, a woman, smaller, holding a crowbar. Her hair was tied back, her shoulders were tense. They looked like the people from last night. They'd found me. I raised my free hand, palm out, keeping the other hand on the strap of my bag. I didn't reach for the rifle because the rifle wasn't slung on my chest right now. I'd left it at the yard. That was a decision I'd made to reduce risk of accidents. Now, it felt like a mistake. "Easy," I said quietly. "I'm leaving." The man's eyes narrowed. "Where are you coming from?" I didn't answer immediately. Silence can be an answer, but silence can also be a spark. "I'm just passing through," I said. "I'm taking water and going." The woman stepped closer. "You're not just passing through. You moved like you know where you're going." My mouth was dry. They watched me like they were trying to decide if I was worth more alive or worth more dead. That's a harsh way to put it, but that's what survival does to people. It turns every stranger into a calculation. I took a breath and chose honesty in a controlled dose. I have a place nearby, I said. I'm alone. I'm not looking for trouble. The man's grip tightened. What place? I hesitated. Then I made another choice, not because it was safe, but because it was the least unsafe. The municipal yard, I said. The city yard with the big fence. The woman's eyes flicked to the man. They shared a look, confirmation. So they had been there. They had scouted it. The man exhaled slowly. We saw it. I know, I said. I saw the cloth. He didn't deny it. That was another kind of honesty. You're alone in there? He asked. Yes. He shook his head like he couldn't believe someone would do that. That's a lot of fence for one person. I'm not defending the whole thing, I said, just the buildings. He considered. The pistol stayed low, which mattered. The woman spoke. We need supplies. We don't want to hurt you. Those words can mean anything. But her tone wasn't aggressive. It was tired. Like she'd rehearsed that sentence 100 times and hated it. I nodded slowly. I don't want to hurt you either. The man's voice hardened slightly. Then we should talk. Everything in me wanted to say no. Everything in me wanted to back out, slip away, and disappear. But disappearing is harder than it sounds when people have already seen you. And if I refused, they might decide to follow me. They might decide the yard was worth taking. So I made a third option. Not here, I said. Too open, too many sounds. The man glanced toward the front of the store where the broken glass could draw infected if something made noise. He nodded, just once. Where then? He asked. I met his eyes. At the yard gate, in daylight, no weapons pointed. You bring 2 people, I bring 1. Except I'm alone, so it's just me. The woman almost smiled at that, like she recognized the absurdity. The man didn't smile. He looked like a person who'd learned not to. Fine, he said. No tricks. No tricks, I echoed. I backed away slowly, grabbed my water, and left through the rear door. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I walked like a person who wasn't afraid, because fear makes you look like prey. I made it back to the yard without incident, but my mind was a storm the whole way. Now, the yard wasn't just visible. It was known. That night, I sat in the workshop with the generator off, the lights off, and I thought about what it meant to hold ground alone. Holding ground isn't just about walls and fences. It's about deciding what you're willing to trade to stay. Sleep for one, peace for another. And the biggest trade, whether you can remain alone when the world doesn't let you. In the morning, I prepared like I was going into a negotiation at work, except work never involved life or death stakes. I cleared the area just inside the main gate. I moved a jersey barrier to create a narrow corridor. I set up my inner barrier so I had cover and a retreat path back to the workshop. I carried my rifle, but I kept it slung and not in my hands. I carried a handgun I'd found earlier in my travels, but it stayed holstered. I didn't want this meeting to become a standoff. At 10:30 a.m., I saw them. The same pickup truck rolled up, slow, stopping 50 feet from the gate. 3 people got out. The man from the store, the woman with the crowbar, and a third person I hadn't seen clearly before. A teenager, maybe 17, wearing a backpack and holding nothing but a stick like they wanted to feel useful. The man approached the gate alone, hands visible. I stood inside the yard, a few steps back from the fence, in the shadow of a parked dump truck. I kept my posture relaxed but ready. I kept my voice calm. You came, I said. He nodded. We said we would. What do you want? I asked. He didn't pretend. A deal. You've got a yard full of resources. You're one person. You can't use it all. We're three. We can help hold it, or we can take what we need somewhere else and leave you with a problem. That was blunt. Not a threat exactly, but a statement of reality. I studied him. He looked like someone who had worked physical jobs. Calloused hands, stiff posture, old injury in the way he favored one leg. The woman looked like someone who had learned to be hard fast. The teenager looked terrified, but trying not to show it. "What's your name?" I asked. He hesitated, then answered, "Marcus." The woman said, "Leah." The teenager said almost too quietly, "Jaden." I nodded. "I'm Owen." It wasn't my full name, but it was enough. Names are bridges and liabilities at the same time. Marcus gestured slightly. "We're not here to fight. We're here because we've been watching this neighborhood and the yard is the best asset around. We don't want it to become a battlefield. We want to survive." I kept my voice steady. "If you come in, it's not your yard. It stays controlled. No engines at night, no lights visible, no loud work in daylight. We keep it boring." Marcus looked past me at the equipment in the yard like he could already see himself using it. "We can keep it boring. We can also make it stronger." Leah added, "We can rotate watch. You look like you haven't slept." I didn't deny it. Denying it would be pointless. "And what do you give me?" I asked, because that's what a deal is. Marcus glanced back at the truck, then at me. "Skills. Food. We've got a small stash. We've got a hand pump and water filters. We've got a radio that reaches farther than those cheap ones. And we're not planning to stay forever. We're moving toward a family north of the city. We just need a base for a few days to regroup." A water filter. That word hit harder than any threat. Water is survival. Everything else is comfort. I weighed it fast. If I refused, they might leave and come back with more people. Or they might spread the word. Or they might decide the yard was too good to ignore. If I accepted, I introduced humans into my space. Humans bring unpredictability. Humans bring conflict. Humans also bring partnership, which is something I hadn't felt in too long. Alone is simpler. Alone is also fragile. I kept my face neutral and asked the most important question. "How do I know you won't lock me out the moment I open the gate?" Marcus didn't flinch. "You don't. Same way, we don't know you won't shoot us as soon as we're inside. That's why we make rules. That's why we start small." Leah spoke again, her tone surprisingly practical. "We can leave our truck outside. We can come in on foot with only personal bags. We can work under your direction. If you don't like it, we leave. If we don't like it, we leave." Jaden nodded hard, like they'd been told to nod. I thought about the yard at night, about my cans-on-wire alarms and my filing cabinet barricade. I thought about how long I could keep this up alone, realistically, without getting sick or making a stupid mistake. Then I did something I didn't expect from myself. I agreed, but on my terms. "One person at a time," I said. "Marcus first. No weapons in hands. Slung or holstered only. You come in, we talk inside the gate. You show me the water filters and the radio. If I don't like what I see, you leave. And that's it." Marcus nodded. "Fair." I walked forward and unlocked the gate, keeping my body angled so I could step back quickly if needed. The gate creaked as it swung inward. The sound felt like a door opening on a life I hadn't planned. Marcus stepped inside slowly, hands visible. He didn't rush. That mattered. Leah and Jaden stayed outside. I closed the gate behind him and locked it again. Now he was inside my perimeter. Now the deal was real. We walked to the cleared space near the dump truck. I kept distance. I didn't point weapons. I didn't act friendly. I acted professional, like a supervisor meeting a contractor on a job site. Marcus opened his jacket and pulled out a small handheld radio, more robust than the cheap job site units. He turned it on. Static, then voices, faint and intermittent. Not clear enough to understand, but unmistakably transmissions. "We monitor channel scans," he said. "Sometimes we catch emergency traffic. Sometimes we catch people talking." He handed it to me. I held it like it was fragile. "This changes things," I said quietly. Marcus nodded. "It's why we've survived." Then he opened his backpack and pulled out a water filter, one of those pump-style units used for hiking, with hoses and a ceramic or membrane filter inside. He also pulled out purification tablets. "Clean water," he said. "We found it in an outdoor store." I stared at it, then looked at him. "This is worth more than fuel," I said. Marcus didn't argue. "Exactly." I exhaled slowly, feeling a shift inside me. "Okay," I said. "Leah comes in next, then Jaden. Same rules." Marcus didn't smile, but his shoulders loosened a fraction, like he'd just set down a heavy load. I let Leah in next. She kept her crowbar in a sling made from rope. She didn't bring the pistol I'd seen Marcus carry. That was also a choice, and I noted it. Jaden came in last, eyes wide, scanning everything like they expected something to leap out from behind a truck. Once they were inside, we moved into the office building and talked with the door closed, voices low. Their story was simple. They'd been part of a small group that split when the supplies ran low and people started fighting. Marcus had worked city maintenance in another district. Leah had been a nursing assistant. Jaden had been with their older brother until he didn't come back from a run. They weren't saints. They weren't villains. They were people doing what people do when the normal rules disappear. I laid out my rules like a checklist. No engine runs unless necessary, and never after dark. No lights visible from outside the fence at night. No opening gates without agreement. No bringing outsiders without discussion. Work is shared, watch shifts, barrier building, supply runs. If anyone breaks the rules, the deal ends. Marcus agreed. Leah agreed. Jaden nodded again. Then the real work began. With 3 people, the municipal yard changed from a position I could barely hold into a place that could actually be shaped. Marcus knew equipment. He found a skid steer with keys in the ignition, probably left there during the evacuation. We checked fluids, checked the battery, checked fuel. We moved slowly, doing it right. When we finally started it, the engine noise made all of us freeze and listen. Then, we kept it running only long enough to move Jersey barriers into a more solid inner perimeter. Leah organized supplies like she'd done it her whole life. She found medical supplies in the first aid cabinet and expanded them with what she carried. Bandages, disinfectant, a thermometer, basic antibiotics and blister packs. She checked my hands for cuts and made me clean them properly, like she was scolding a kid. Jaden surprised me by being useful in the way teenagers can be when they want to prove themselves, hauling sandbags, tying wire, organizing tools, running quietly back and forth with whatever we needed. In 2 days, we had transformed the inner area around the workshop and office into a compact compound. Jersey barriers and temporary fencing panels forming a layered ring. Vehicles positioned as blocks, clear lines of sight, alarms on likely entry points. We still couldn't secure the whole yard, but we didn't need to. We were holding a visible location by making it harder to approach, harder to read, and easier to abandon if we had to. That last part stayed in my mind, because defending a place is only worth it if the place doesn't become your coffin. On the 3rd night with them, the yard was tested. It started with noise outside the fence, footsteps and a low, urgent murmur. Not infected. Human. We were inside the workshop, lights low and covered, eating a quiet meal of canned beans warmed on a small camp stove. The alarm cans near the side gate rattled softly. Leah went still. Marcus lifted a hand, signaling silence. Jaden's eyes went wide. I moved to the workshop's side window and peeked through a crack in the covering. Outside the fence, near the side gate, were 4 people. They weren't the same 3 from before. These were different. 2 men, 2 women, all carrying bags. One held a baseball bat. Another held what looked like a shotgun. They stood close to the gate, whispering, looking around. They were exactly what I'd feared. People who had heard about a municipal yard full of resources. Marcus leaned close. They followed our truck, he whispered, his face tight, or they saw us go in. Leah's jaw clenched, or someone else told them. My mind ran through options fast. If we stayed silent, they might leave, or they might try to force entry. If we confronted them, it could escalate. But if we did nothing and they broke in, we'd be fighting inside our own perimeter. So I chose a controlled reveal. I stepped into the office building's front room, positioned behind a closed window where my silhouette wouldn't be obvious, and spoke loudly enough to be heard through the fence, but not loud enough to echo down the street. "Stop where you are," I said. Calm, firm, no shouting. The group froze. The one with the shotgun raised it slightly, not aiming at anything yet, but reacting. I continued, "This yard is occupied. Do not touch the gate." A man's voice answered, tense. "We just want to talk." "Talk from there," I said. There was a pause. Then the same voice. "We need supplies. We saw the yard. We're not trying to cause problems." Marcus whispered, "They are trying to cause problems." Leah whispered, "Not yet, but they will." I kept my voice steady. "I can't help you. Move on." The man's voice sharpened. "You don't own the city." I almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm not claiming the city. I'm claiming survival. Leave." The group shifted. The one with the bat stepped closer to the gate. The alarm cans rattled again. Marcus moved up beside me, his own voice cutting in, calm but cold. "Back away from the fence, now." The group hesitated. Then the woman with them said something, low, urging. The man with the shotgun looked left and right down the street as if suddenly aware of how exposed they were. Because that was the truth. Outside the fence, at night, you are visible. You are noisy. You are vulnerable. Finally, they stepped back. The man's voice called out, "This isn't over." I didn't answer. They left, retreating with the same quiet urgency they arrived with. We waited a long time after that, listening, expecting them to circle around, to try another gate, to cut the fence. Nothing came. But the message was clear. Holding this yard meant conflict was inevitable. That night, after the tension faded enough for our hands to stop shaking, Marcus sat on a folding chair in the workshop and stared at the concrete floor. "People are going to come," he said. "More than 4. "I know," I said. Leah looked at me. "So, what's the plan, Owen?" Because defending a visible location alone was already risky. Defending it with 3 more people makes it more valuable. She was right. Every addition made us stronger and made us a bigger target. I leaned back against the workbench and felt exhaustion settle into my bones like wet concrete. "The plan," I said slowly, "is to decide whether this place is worth the constant danger." Jaden's voice was small. "Is it?" I looked at the yard through the workshop opening. seeing the outlines of trucks and fences and barriers under moonlight. "It's worth it," I said, "until it isn't." We spent the next day doing the work that people always do when they sense a storm coming. Preparation mixed with denial. We moved supplies into the workshop and office, consolidating everything important: food, water, medical, tools, so we could leave quickly if needed. We made go bags with essentials: water bottles, filters, flashlights, batteries, basic medicine, clothing. We mapped exit routes through the yard, through the fence weak points, along alleys, toward the river, toward neighborhoods that looked less dense. We also made a harder choice. We stopped running the generator except for short bursts in daylight under cover. We accepted less comfort for less visibility. Then, late afternoon, the radio Marcus brought crackled with a clear voice. It wasn't a conversation. It was a broadcast. "This is Philadelphia Emergency Coordination," a tired voice said, repeating. "If you are receiving this, proceed to established aid points. Curfew conditions. Water advisories. Keep lights low. Avoid major intersections. If you are in possession of fuel storage or heavy equipment, do not engage alone." We stared at the radio. The voice repeated, listing locations: a hospital campus, a civic center, a police precinct. Some of those places might be safe, some might be traps, some might already be overrun. But the message meant one thing: somewhere, some structure still existed. Leah's eyes met mine. "Aid points," she said. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Those places draw crowds. And crowds draw the infected," I said. Jaden swallowed. "But it's something." I listened to the broadcast again. It wasn't hopeful, it was administrative. The tone of someone reading instructions because that's what they were trained to do, even if the world didn't deserve the effort anymore. And one line kept repeating in my mind: "If you are in possession of fuel storage or heavy equipment, do not engage alone." The city was basically warning people like us, you will become a target. We already had. That night, the yard was tested again, this time harder. The alarm cans on the main gate rattled, then clanged, louder. Not wind, not accident. Someone was at the gate. We took positions without speaking. Marcus, near the office window. Leah, near the workshop door, crowbar in hand. Jaden, behind us, crouched, clutching a flashlight like it was a weapon. I moved to the narrow viewing gap we had created in the workshop's door covering. Outside the main gate, 6 people stood in a loose line. 6. And behind them, down the street, another shape moved. Someone hanging back. They weren't trying to be quiet now. They were confident. The leader stepped forward. He wore a dark coat and a backpack. In his hand was a crowbar. He rattled the gate with it. Then he spoke, loud enough for us to hear. "We know you're in there. We're not leaving." Marcus muttered, "Here we go." Leah whispered, "Don't answer." But I knew silence wouldn't solve this. These weren't lost people asking for help, they were claiming. I spoke from inside, steady and controlled. "Move away from the gate." The leader laughed, harsh. "Or what? You'll shoot us? You'll waste ammo on a fence?" I didn't take the bait. "This yard is occupied, you are not welcome. Leave now." He stepped closer. "We need equipment. We need fuel. You don't get to hoard it." That word hoard is what people use to justify taking. Marcus leaned in. "Tell them to go. If they cut the fence, we fall back." Leah's voice was tight. "They'll keep coming back." The leader raised the crowbar and struck the gate latch area with a metallic clang. Loud, purposeful. That sound rolled down the street. And somewhere far away I heard answering shuffles. The infected were not at the gate yet, but the city listens. The group at the gate didn't care, or they didn't understand what they were summoning. I made my decision then, not because I wanted to, but because the math forced it. Holding ground was no longer worth the constant danger. Not here, not now, not alone or with 3. Because this yard was becoming a beacon. I turned to Marcus and Leah. "We leave," I said quietly. Marcus blinked, then nodded immediately, like he'd been waiting for permission. Leah looked at me hard. "Now?" "Now," I said. "Before they get in, before the noise brings worse." Jaden's face crumpled for a second. Fear and disbelief. "We're just giving it up." "We're not giving up," I said. "We're moving." The leader outside struck the gate again, louder. The infected sounds grew closer, faint but real, like distant rain. We moved fast, but not frantic. Grabbed go bags, grabbed the radio, grabbed the water filter. Leah grabbed medical supplies. Marcus grabbed a tool pouch with essentials, bolt cutters, a wrench, a small hammer, things you can't replace easily. I took the keys, because keys are power, even if you walk away. We didn't run out the main gate, that would be walking into the group. Instead, we used the back corner exit point, the bent fence section I'd entered through on the first day. We had reinforced it, but we had also left ourselves a way out. We peeled back the inner pallets quietly. We slipped through one at a time, careful of barbed wire. We moved down into the ditch and then along the railroad embankment, keeping low. Behind us, the noise at the gate escalated, metal clanging, voices raised. Then, suddenly, a different kind of noise, urgent shouting, not from the group at the gate but from down the street, panic and voices. They had drawn attention they didn't want. We didn't stop to watch. We moved. The municipal yard faded behind us, not as a failure, but as a chapter that had taught me something important. A strong position isn't just one you can defend, it's one you can leave. As we moved along the tracks, heading toward the next uncertain shelter, I looked back once, just once, at the fence line and the dark shapes moving near the gate. I didn't feel triumph. I felt relief. Because I had claimed an abandoned municipal yard and defended it, as long as it made sense. And when it stopped making sense, I walked away. In this world, that might be the only kind of victory left. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.